Welcome to the Holistic Programmer for coding and health tips with your host, Brian Kidd. Hello, I just wanted to make a quick video about some CSS methodologies that I employ in order to make my CSS more readable and also more organized. So the first of all, some of these methodologies I decided to employ, especially after watching the CSS Essential Learning lessons on LinkedIn Learning. And there were some good ideas on there and some things that I hadn't really thought about. But in the past, I have made sure that on every CSS style sheet that I have, that I do put a title and a version and last modified by me, and then I guess the original author, and then the email and website, so that's the URL. So that way, if there's any changes made to the CSS document, obviously you know who made them, you know who the original author is, you know how to contact me or whoever the original author is, and then also you know what URL it's for and the version, etc. So that's really useful, especially for someone that's looking at your CSS that might have questions. But you really want to avoid them having too many questions, right? And one of the ways to do that is make sure it's well organized. And one of the things that the teacher of the lessons suggested, and I never really thought about this, but if you get a color palette, you can just comment it out, obviously, and put in the hexadecimal numbers. Here's the source, and then the hexadecimal numbers, and then the colors that are related to those hexadecimal numbers. And then that way, they're easy to copy and paste and plug into your code. So, for instance, yellow. If I wanted to copy and paste that, I just copy and paste it, plug it into my code. And you might notice that this code is organized into different sections. So here's global style. So obviously this applies to the entire website. But you can also break it down into pages and then sections of those pages. So you have your profile section, your project section, and here's all the CSS that applies to the profile section, the project section, and then the work experience. So if I look at the website that this refers to, here's work experience here. So let's say, for instance, there's something in education that you don't like, or you might question, like, why are the pencils aligned that way? Maybe you want them further over, or whatever. You want to manipulate the background somehow. Well, instead of having to look through the entire CSS sheet and without any sections or anything, you just simply go, oh, there's the work experience section, so it must be somewhere in there. There's the background, I'd like to change that somehow. So that's really a simple thing, but if you looked at some CSS sheets, they're just so random, and I've been guilty of this. I had an old website that I did, and that website, I think I tried to originally do it with the flow of the page, but if you look, it's not really organized as well as it could be. So it's not really easy to follow. It could be a lot easier to follow, but it's not. It's kind of when I was sort of starting, and it's not as nice as it could be, but it's not horrible, but it could be a lot better organized. So that's just something that you might want to take note of when you're creating your CSS style sheets. And so one of the last things I want to talk about really quick is if you want to learn, and I know I've mentioned LinkedIn Learning, and LinkedIn Learning does cost money, and so if you want a free alternative that's actually really good, it's freecodecamp.org. I can't recommend them enough. I used them first to get my front-end certificate. And for instance, we were talking about CSS, and one of the things that they talked about in the video is something called Flexbox. So if you want to learn Flexbox, it's all here. Here's all the lessons. Let's see if I can find So if you go to the lessons themselves, you'll see there's all the different sections of Flexbox that they have, things that you can do if you want to, and then they'll have the CSS here, and they'll show how it will work. For instance, something really simple here is if I change this to display and flex, and it'll just show the result. And so that's kind of nice and just really simple. They have JavaScript lessons. They even have like server-side lessons as well. They have a whole bunch of different languages that you can learn. But this is something that I'm going to go through probably next week because I haven't really used Flexbox a lot, and it's a really good way to to lay out your page because it seems like it's really effective. It's easier to center and position things than just kind of doing floats. So it's pretty new. I think it's been around for a few years now, but it's becoming a lot more used just because it seems like it's really a lot easier to make responsive designs and layouts with Flexbox. But that's for a different video. Probably I'll go into that a little more detail. One thing though that I forgot to mention, and it's a pretty easy concept, but if you want, let's say you have an image and it's in a retina display. Well, as you might know, in CSS pixels, retina display, those device pixels, usually there's 2 per CSS pixels. So retina displays are really popular on MacBooks, for instance, and other devices. So if you want to have a sharper image, one thing you can do, let's say you have a picture that you want to display at 200 by 400. Well, you could make the image twice as big, 400 by 800, and then resize it when you get it into, when you place it into your CSS and into your page. So that's something I think there's an example of that in the lessons. Well, let's say, for instance, just for illustrative purposes, that the original image, let's say that you had an image that was, let's see if, well, I don't, see if I can go into the HTML of this. Let's see real quick here. I'm not sure if they, let's see if it shows. Okay, so let's see, we try to find an image on this guy. And let's see. Well, it doesn't look like there's anything that's resized. But what you could do is if you had an image that you wanted to resize, you can do a width and height. And so with the image that the theoretical image that I was talking about, let's say that you loaded it, but when you loaded it, it was 400 by 800, but you want it to be 200 by 400, right? So you just do a simple width equals, right, 200 . And you can do it like that. You don't need a space there, but you can have one. It depends on your style. But I'm sorry. So width equals 400. So the original image of this would be 400 by 800, but now you're just shrinking it down to fit the size that you wanted to display at. But it's going to have a sharper resolution because you did that. And so there's another method that you can employ. It's a little bit harder, but let me show you real quick here. Okay, so if you wanted, I think, I'm sure that I have. Here it is. Okay, so if you wanted to do the same thing that I did, but use CSS, there is a way, and I'll leave the link in the video description so you guys can check it out. But this is a different way that you can do that. And I think it has to do, I haven't done this yet, but it's at media screen. And as you see, the ratio is different here. It's not 1. And it looks like basically just takes all your images that you would put in a certain size and it makes them sharper. So if you have a background image and it's 200 by 300 and the height is this, it'll make sure that it makes it sharper within the retina display. So basically what you're looking at here is if you have an image 200 pixels by 400 pixels and we want to display it properly in a retina display, we can upload an alternative image of size 400 by 800 pixels, which I referred to earlier, in our server, and read and render them whenever a web page is open in a retina device. So this is actually cool because you won't have to do it for every image. You can actually just do it as a global rule, basically. So here's your class, and when you go down here, it says right here, so there's your class image, and this is your image that you're using for a background. But if you want to do for high resolution displays only, you use this code. And it looks like these are for the different, this is Opera, WebKit. I believe that's for Chrome. Anyway, these different browsers will display, the rules will display according to these ratios, and then that will make the picture have a higher resolution if you're using retina displays. That is really important, I think. And I don't know, I guess I'm really into images because I've discussed them before. Just think they need to look really sharp, and that's one way of doing it. So I'll put a link to that. And anyway, that's just a really quick, basic, some observations that I had when I was going through the CSS LinkedIn Learning, CSS Essentials training, the essential training there. So if I go to my CSS here, if I go back to that, I made some other notes, some things that I might cover later, and that includes looks like margin collapsing is something that I knew about, but they go into detail about that. Inline elements don't align vertically when you add padding and margin to it, and so that's something that you might as well think about. And some of that goes into the box model that I'll touch on in a different video. And here's some, I'll put these in the video description too. Here's some references that you refer to, and there's some other stuff with combinators and grids, advanced selectives, and combinators, and things like that that have to do with inheritance that I probably go over in a future video. But I hope this is helpful just to give you a basic overview of some of the things that I found some of the simpler things that I found important in those videos that just make it easier to organize your CSS. And hopefully you'll check out freecodecamp.org too if you're planning on starting to learn code. It's really a great resource, and it's free. So check it out. Have a good one. Later.
Thank you for watching another edition of The Holistic Programmer. For more details, please see video information. Please support by pressing the like button.